Alrighty, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, we're going to go over some more advanced objection overcome strategies. We're going to dive into a little bit more of the psychology. So in past videos, we've discussed looping, some standard objection overcome, which are really, in our mind, what we believe are the skill sets to get you to that 50% close rate, 50% conversion rate. Today is going to be more of the skill sets, a little bit more advanced looping that might be the skill set that gets somebody from 50 to 70%. So a little bit more advanced. If this is a strategy that we're trying to implement, I wouldn't put this in like your elementary basic training that you do with like a brand new trainer. It's just too much to remember, too much to understand. But this is definitely something to look at improving over time to become more of like a behavior change specialist, if you will. So just as like a broad overview, what cognitive distortions are essentially logical fallacies that people adopt to disempower themselves, delegate ownership, and then ultimately protect their ego. So it looks, in our mind, the analogy that we're going to be using today is one of Alex Hormozi's, which is that of an onion, where you have, first, you blame circumstances, things outside of your control. Second, you blame other people. And then third, you blame personal limitations. All reasons that aren't really true. I mean, they may be true, but they don't serve you as to why you can't move forward or why you can't empower yourself with decision rights. So I know, Tiger, you dive into each of these three, with a couple different strategies, if you will. So let's start with the outside of that onion. So when people are blaming circumstances, right, we're diving into that, those looping strategies.
Yeah. So whenever we're looking at circumstances, we have the circumstance of like time. That typically like in the personal training space where somebody says like, I don't have time to work out, or I can't find a time to meet with a trainer. I need to just come at random times. You have like value, right? So it's typically like a price point issue, which like Andy and I were discussing before the podcast. Almost all the decisions regarding personal training, if you're doing a halfway decent job, are going to be because of money, not because of the value you're providing. And then lastly, like the fit, if you will. So whether or not it's the right fit or the right program for them to follow in order to get from A to B. Okay. And so I think this is also important real quick to touch on that. One thing we also talked about pre-podcast was like that when we're going through some of these questions and stuff, we don't just want people to say yes, right? And we don't want to just be like emotional salesmen where somebody like says yes because it feels like they're excited, I guess, if you will. You also want them to have like a logical reason for signing up with you. If they decide to, because that's what's going to keep them with you long term and should yield them a higher level of results too. What was the word you used?
100%. So what we're talking about pre-podcast is the strategies that we're talking about today is really not the strategies to get somebody to say yes, as if sales is just some binary process of getting someone to say yes or they say no. Just having them make a decision. Of course, at face value it is. But really what we're trying to do through our sales process is the degree to which they commit and say yes, right? So, you can make two different kinds of sales, let's say. You have someone that says yes begrudgingly, where they may come on as a client with you, but they do 25% of what you say because they really weren't sold on the value. You didn't really empower them with enough decision rights to take on all the facets of their lifestyle that's required in getting great shape. And then you have those that do commit at that level because you empowered them and you broke down all the cognitive distortions and all the things that limited that, as opposed to just getting them to say yes and just take out their pocketbook.
So it's kind of cool because the personal training like starts now, right? Like at this point, you're already coaching them. They don't know you're coaching them yet. Before they've even like signed up with you or not signed up with you, you're coaching them on, I guess, their lens that they're viewing the world or their lens that they're viewing this goal that they have. And so you can see that directly when we talk about the time thing. So like whenever you have a client or a potential client or a lead saying like, oh, I don't have necessarily like enough time to come in. I'm really, really busy right now. There's a lot going on. So it could be like kids are playing soccer, my father's sick, and like all these other things are coming at them, right? And of course it sounds like a lot and we want to be empathetic to that. But typically, for me, the question that I usually follow up with is like, okay, do you think you're going to be busy again in the future? Right? And their answer, of course, is, well, yes, of course. And I was like, okay, so do you think that it would be like more equitable for us to start now, like while you're busy and get good at doing this while your schedule's busy, or wait until your schedule's empty? Because then what's going to happen is you're going to get busy again and then you're going to fall back off the program.
So this is a great already follow up into what we were just talking about. We're always be coaching. We're setting that precedent now. We're going to be looking at overcoming all these obstacles that a lot of times trainers don't hear till down the road. Like they get a client started, they have a great first month of progress, and then like a kid's sport starts, right? And then the client falls off. We didn't already have that conversation about how we're going to be, relating to this to all their other time constraints and all their other priorities. So the best time that we can get an objection is in that first consultation. If we can get all of those, up front, awesome, right? And maybe we don't have a perfect solution for all of those yet, right? As we're getting them started, but at least they're addressed. We've set that precedent that we're going to team up on these issues, these obstacles together, and none of them are going to get in the way of us achieving the result.
I literally just had a great example of this on Thursday. I teamed up with a new member, and she was like, "Well, I really can't start until April because I have, this trip coming up, and my daughter's having a baby, and so like I really can't get rolling until April." And I'm like, actually, that's awesome. I have so many clients that travel so much that this is what I do for them whenever they're traveling. I give them like a workout plan the day that they arrive in whatever hotel that they're in, with whatever equipment they have, and so they have like a specified program to follow, and then we help like with their nutritional on the way. So I was like, so if you want to get started on this now, I can provide all that for you on this next week or two. I was like, then you're going to be even more ready when you come in to see me. You're actually going to have like a little bit of a foundation set. So would you rather just get started today so we can do that for you? And she said yes. So it's like, not only is she now like more committed to the idea because she's going to exercise for this week or two while she's gone, but it also got her like to where she's not going to run into some other excuse in the next week or two as to why she can't sign up because she already signed up today.
Yep.
So it was a perfect example of like how this can really, really help benefit your business and, I don't want to say get the money in now, but at least I'm getting the commitment out of her where I know that she's going to be committed to this program when she gets back instead of waiting when she gets back.
Right. It's always about empowering your client with decision rights. So not just to say have that initial yes, but to essentially choose to put themselves first as a priority every step of the way. So they're going on a trip, awesome. With me as your trainer, that doesn't mean that you don't work out, that we don't make progress, right? With unfortunately a lot of trainers out there, that is the case, right? Every time an obstacle comes up, essentially we let that person take a step back. And those leads to high churn rates, low retention. It leads to, poor client satisfaction, low referrals, right? If your clients aren't referring you business, it's more than likely because we haven't empowered them to want to do so, either with results or a great experience, etc. So this is, again, one of those more advanced skill sets that can help take our business to the next level.
So the next one, and the one that probably like most of us are running into, or that you're going to see a lot, is value, right? And so that's like when it's like a price point issue. This is probably the hardest one to overcome because, sometimes it is reality. Sometimes somebody might legitimately not be able to afford the program. Does that mean that we can't help them? Of course not, right? We still want to provide as much value as we can. But sometimes it's a belief issue as well around finances or a belief on like the value that they're receiving. I love this question. I think it's super cool, but the question that you can sometimes follow up with is like, well, wouldn't you be concerned if it was cheaper? Like, wouldn't you be concerned if this was half the price? Because at the end of the day, like if the price point wasn't high, which is what they're essentially claiming, right, then the product wouldn't work, right? Like I don't buy cheap shoes because shoes don't last very long if they're cheap and then my feet hurt and that's a problem. Like I'd rather buy expensive shoes.
100%. Now this isn't like a retort, if you will, for all clientele, right? But there is a certain type of buyer, right, that is just always looking for a bargain or always looking for a deal. And you're going to know who those individuals are because when you present the prices, not only is it like, oh, like it's more expensive than I thought. It's like, that's way too much. Like that's way more than it should be, right? That's where I find that like a really good retort where those people that are looking for deals typically also have the finances and means to still do the program. So it's a great comeback, if you will.
Definitely for like some of those higher end clients.
For sure.
It definitely works well.
Yeah. And it empowers them. So it breaks through that cognitive distortion. Yeah. So that's a great one.
What do you typically use in a situation like that where if somebody's just saying like, look, I just don't think I can afford this?
For sure. So the process of looping that I know we've talked about before, that would be more into our third loop or towards the end of where we're negotiating on that one program, right? Or that one frequency that we've been kind of whittling down on. I haven't adjusted the program yet. At that point, I like going old school and using feel, felt, found. So I completely understand how you feel. A lot of my best clients before they got started felt the exact same way. And what they found, and what we found, is that for some strange reason, investing in yourself is one of the hardest things that we can do. But it's also, one of the things that yields the highest return. So we need to make sure that we come up with some kind of solution. So just for clarity's sake, is it about the commitment period of looking at doing this program over the course of the next 12 months, 18 months, however long the program period is, or is it about just the upfront investment that gives you concern? And if it's truly, if it's the commitment period, great. You just shorten it and they can make that decision on the inside. You have to have enough faith in your program. If it's about the upfront investment cost, right? Completely understand. Sometimes with everything going on in your life right now, it may not make sense to invest as much as you really need to, but we still need to find a solution. So we might need to start out a little smaller, right?
Yeah. So just to provide clarity, because I know that at least half of the people that just heard that are completely lost on what he's saying. Okay, if we're talking about, I'm going to dumb everything down because he's smart. He talks above us sometimes. So if we're talking about like a monthly option versus like a package. So it's what you're asking them essentially is like, so if I presented 3 months of training 3 times a week and that was $2,400 versus the alternative is like monthly and it's $900 a month, right? And what I'm asking them is like, hey, just so I'm clear on like, where the price point issue is, are you more concerned with like the $2,400 that you're going to be, investing right away? Or is it more concerned with like the idea of doing $900 monthly over 6 months or a year, right? That's the question we're truthfully kind of asking is like, is it the upfront total amount this next month? Or is it more of like the idea of paying that for a year every single month that's kind of scaring you, or every 3 months, however long you guys are renewing your packages, right? And you get some really good answers out of that, where sometimes it's very simple. Or sometimes it's just like, oh, I'm just a little more worried about the upfront cost. And so you can just be like, okay, would you rather just do the monthly option then? And they'll just say yes. And then now they're signed up and they're still getting 3 times a week frequency as far as training goes, right? That's what you're talking about? Okay, cool.
For sure.
I just want to make sure we were clear about that. But I love that questioning too. I use that one a lot myself when it's not somebody that I think's looking for a deal.
Yep. So yeah, at that point where I whittle it down and I still get a commitment to a program, at that point is the only time that we decrease frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm talking about value, right, it's typically a discussion around value on one program that's presented. So I present one program and I try to get 4 or 5 no's on that one program before adjusting it.
And by one program, he's talking about training frequency. So
yes.
Like him and I are firm believers that almost everybody that walks through the gym should train 3 days a week at a minimum, like preferably more, right? And that's why in our looping video, if you guys watched it, we asked the question ahead of time, if this were free, we'd train 7 days a week, right? And we hope for a right back, because at the end of the day, we know that the value that's provided at 3 times a week is definitely over 3 times the value of what 1 time a week is.
Mm-hmm. And it is perception. So, I ask this question to new trainers when they first start to kind of help them get over that hump of perceived value, right? Where a lot of times for a brand new trainer, they have someone that they might idolize in the fitness industry, right? Give me an example of somebody.
Chris Bumstead,
right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of our other trainers. That was the individual that he brought up, right? And now I said, if Chris Bumstead came to town and was offering one-on-one training sessions, what would you pay for an hour of Chris Bumstead's time to train you, right? And it was some stupid number that he gave back to me, right? Probably well above and beyond. No offense to Chris Bumstead, right? But probably well above
his
and beyond
knowledge base, yes.
the value of that hour, right? But to this individual, I think he said like $1,000. Like he'd pay $1,000 for an hour of this individual's time, right? And this guy's already fit, like he's already in shape.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So the degree to which Chris Bumstead would have helped him, right, would have been minuscule, would have been small, right? And the value of $1,000 for this individual, brand new starting, is high, right? So it's crazy that this individual who doesn't need it as much, right, and needs $1,000 a lot more than some other individuals would have paid it in a heartbeat.
And it's funny because that same trainer, if you asked him how much are you going to charge for an hour of your time, probably would say like $30 or something crazy.
Yeah, again, it's all perceived value.
It's all perception. I remember when I first started, like being terrified of asking somebody to train, more than 1 day a week, because to me, I was like, if they're training 3 days a week, I was doing the math in my head. I'm like, that's $210 a week. That's like, what is that, $800 a month? I'm like, nobody's going to pay that, right? And the problem is, and at the end of the day, like as trainers, sometimes we start to think with our own pocketbooks, right? not only do we like think with our own amount of money we have, we're like, I can't afford that, so why would anybody else be able to afford that? But then also on the other side of things, like what comes easy to us as trainers does not come easy to other people. And so like you might have let's say somebody that's relatively wealthy sitting across from you that's out of shape. And like as a trainer, we think that the knowledge base that we have is super rudimentary and like basic, and like that the guy that's sitting across from us already knows how to do all that. In all reality, they have absolutely no clue. So the knowledge base that you have is like worth an insurmountable amount of value, especially to them. So you can ask for those bigger price tags and move forward and actually assist them because you're asking for that bigger price tag.
And I've seen the opposite of that become true too for trainers. So early on, yes, they might struggle with presenting prices, let's say, through the lens of their own pocketbook. But down the road, I've also seen trainers that have become very successful, right? Where let's say like selling a basic level program to somebody where that really is all they can afford. Sometimes trainers even don't even bother going that low. They just let the person walk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's either like a multi-$1,000 package or bust. And I've seen that happen before. Unfortunately, it doesn't serve the member, which of course has to be our number one priority. Mm-hmm. And that's where, we have a fitness consulting system where you onboard the client and you team them up with another trainer. That always comes back with dividends because maybe that person, of course, can't train with you, right? Or the trainer that's proposing the personal training packages in the first place. But that person might know people, right? Mm-hmm. Or down the road, like who knows where life circumstances and whatnot take that person.
They could win the lottery and upgrade. You never know. You never know.
So put them on your waiting list.
Okay, so the next cognitive distortion, if you will, under circumstances is fit. So like, is this the right program for me? When we think about exercise, there's a million different, we have Orange Theory, you have CrossFit, you have bodybuilding, you have a million different things. So like somebody might be completely latched onto something or whatever. So I kind of see where the fit thing can come in. I don't think like I run into this problem a lot, but we definitely like use this question a lot where if somebody's like, I don't necessarily know that I want to do this, or I don't know if this is for me. So the follow-up question that we typically ask, we encourage our trainers to ask, if this were the perfect program, then would there be any reason not to sign up today? Like if this program were perfect and you felt like the results were guaranteed, why would you not sign up? Right. And so then they're usually, most likely they're going to say like, oh, well, it's missing like help with my nutrition. And then you can be like, oh, I totally forgot to even cover that. Like, let me show you. And you pull out your phone and you show them all these nutrition spreadsheets. And you're like, this is something we included in all the packages. I was like, that's super wrong of me to assume that you already knew that. But we do provide that. Now that you know that, does that change how you feel about the program? And then usually the answer is yes. And now if they say that like there is no difference between the program you're providing and the perfect program, then what's the reason for not signing up, right?
It's either a fear of it's just hesitating, which you can help walk them through that, or it's just price. So I completely agree. I'm glad that you brought up the nutrition piece because it's not just that we're competing against other alternative fitness solutions, but people get tied to, well, my doctor says I need to do X, Y, Z, right? My doctor told me I should only do water exercise, right? And let's say you're a trainer that doesn't
heard that one a lot,
right? Let's say that you don't work with clients in the water, right? Does that mean that you can't help that individual because their doctor told them that they can only work in the water? Of course not, right? Or yes, my nutritionist says I need to do X, Y, Z, and I shouldn't be doing something else with my exercise, right? Oftentimes it's not like an alternative fitness service, especially if you've done a good job in the first 2/3 of the assessment. That shouldn't be one that you run into. And I'd say, the first 2/3 of the assessment and workout portion, if that's done well, fit should probably be like the least likely one of those circumstances that someone brings up to disempower.
It's funny because this is like some advanced strategies of conversation, if you will. But as you become advanced as a trainer, you actually move through a ton of these before you even sit down and have the conversation, which is awesome. And then you can also attack and confess on most of these things, which before I mentioned the thing about, like if this were free, you do it 7 days a week, right? We also attack and confess with fit a little bit. And Andy, I know you used to use this one a lot where you'd be like providing all these solutions for somebody and be like, so we're going to give you A, B, C, and D. So we're going to like fix all these problems for you. Just real quick to check with you, knowing that we're going to provide all of this, is there any like moral reason you have for like why you wouldn't want to sign up for this? Like some people, despite knowing that their problems are going to be solved, just won't sign up because like they don't want help. Like that's not you, right? Yeah. Right. And so it's just like it kind of gets over that fit paradigm, if you will, ahead of time. So you don't even have to go into that questioning later.
Yeah. I like to throw it in a little bit more off the cuff, but yes.
Yeah, you're more off the cuff about it than I am. I don't know how you do it, but you're good at it. Okay. So the next big like cognitive distortion that people like allow themselves to block a decision that they want to make is others, right? And so the most common one, and you guys have probably already like heard this 1,000 times, if not, you're going to hear it, is that like, oh, I need to ask my wife or I need to ask my husband whether or not I can do this.
Yeah, that's the one that you'll hear 99% of the time. Occasionally you might get like, I need to pray about it or something like that, but most of the time it's going to be a spousal objection.
Yes. And so again, we both believe that like most likely it's going to come back down to like a dollar amount. So Andy, I know you do. What do you do with partners?
With partners?
Yeah, whenever it's like a partnership, don't you say like if it was free, would there be any reason your husband wouldn't? Right.
Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. That's what I'm thinking in my head, is that if it were free, right, that probably wouldn't be something that they would need to do.
Yeah, you don't need to ask your husband if this program's free.
They probably had that discussion ahead of time, like, hey, I'm going in for a training session today, right? They've already discussed, personal training potentially being a solution. The only thing they haven't discussed is price. So what I want to make sure that happens is that even if they go home, right, because they really need permission or whatnot to make that buying decision, I want to make sure they don't go home with a no number, right? So if I can get them committed to something, right, and then potentially we might need to alter it on the back end, I know that's going to be the best potential solution. What I also don't want to do, and I know this isn't like novelty, like this isn't an original thought to us, but I don't want that person to be super excited about this program, believe it's the perfect solution for them, and then go home to their spouse knowing that they're going to say no, and then resent and be upset with their spouse, right?
Which is common. I mean, that happens.
It's extremely common. Like, oh man, I'd love to do this, but my husband won't let me, or my wife won't let me. That's what they're really saying oftentimes, and sometimes that's a tough read. But that's oftentimes what they're saying when they say like, oh, I need to go home and talk it over with my wife or with my husband. So I proceed through the same 3 loops, so you can refer to the other looping video.
I like going through like, okay, does your partner know that you're here today? And like, does your partner know that you're struggling with this specific issue that you mentioned before, right? And you kind of exaggerate the past pain a little bit about the issue that they're struggling with. And usually they're going to say, yeah, they know that I like don't like how I look in the mirror. And be like, okay, well, is there any like specific reason they'd be opposed to you solving that issue? And so is there any reason they'd be opposed to you like following this program that's going to allow you to be happy when you look in the mirror? And then they're going to probably refer back to like, well, it's a price point thing. Be like, okay, so follow-up question, is there a price point that you could, we go ahead and get some level of commitment to, where you can at least start moving the needle in the right direction on this, where if you went home to your spouse, they wouldn't be upset with you, right? And
you wouldn't be sleeping on the couch.
Yeah, you're not sleeping on the couch, right? So you want to like exaggerate, make it funny, because you just brought up price point again. And so then usually they might give you like a lower amount, and so you might have to start with like a lower frequency, but then they go home and talk to their partner and they come back and they're like, actually, I can do 3 times a week. My husband said it was a good idea.
Yeah.
You know? And so you see that sometimes too. Big thing is that we do want to get them on a plan today when they're like ready to make that decision.
For sure. So two things, and I hope I'm not going to forget the second one. But one thing I do say when I'm working with a spousal type scenario is I want to make sure that we don't lose excitement in your program where you go home and potentially would get a no, right? So alluding to what I had talked about before, right? So we want to set up a number that you know your spouse would be okay with. And then at that point, we can always upgrade when you go home and speak to them. So that way you feel great about us getting started. We took action at solving this problem today. That's something that we've been struggling with for years, right? Something that obviously you and your spouse have been struggling with for years. We want to make sure we set on a course of action for that today, and then we can always upgrade. The second one is more of a attack and confess strategy. And when we say attack and confess, meaning we're attacking that objection before it's brought up. We're confessing that other people have struggled with it. So in their mind, they're aligning with that frame, if you will. So with a spouse, right? Old school sales would be like, is your husband or wife supportive of you, right? Are they supportive of you coming into the gym, working out, etc., right? What I like to do is I'll assume that. So I know that your husband or wife is supportive of you, right? I know that they're in here. They're loving the fact that you're taking charge of your health. So let's just pretend for a second that they aren't super supportive. Right? They don't want you in here at all, right? Or let's pretend like they're for some reason out of the picture. Is this something that you would do for yourself, right? Is this something that regardless of whether someone else is pushing you to come in here, your doctor or your spouse, whatever, is this something you're ready to do for yourself today, right? So where you make it about them, you peel off that layer of the onion, and it's about personal empowerment and removing any restrictive limitations.
I think that's great too, because when you give them that personal empowerment and they do go home, and Alex Ramosi talks about this, and I don't ever do it because I think it's kind of like a very long, drawn out thing to talk about. But it ends up changing the question that they ask their partner when they go home. So rather than asking, my wife, if you will, asking her like, hey, can I start this program? You tell them, hey, I'm going to start this program. What I want to ask for is that you support me on my goal and like support me with doing this program. And so it kind of changes the way they ask it, because at the end of the day, if they go home and again, they ask if whether or not they can do this program. Let's say I hate looking at myself in the mirror and I ask my wife, hey, can I do this thing? It's going to solve my problem. And she says no. Now, every time I look in the mirror, I'm going to associate that problem in the mirror with my wife, because my wife's the reason I never solved it. And so by giving these people this power, it's kind of crazy, but you're legitimately helping their like actual relationship at home too sometimes, where you're providing, I mean, that's such a huge value add on. It's super cool to empower people that much.
Yeah, we're definitely not just selling fitness here. Like,
No.
We're selling complete quality of life across the board.
1,000%. And so then the last one, and again, as you get better at this and as you get better at, training, this is usually the one you end up running to at the end anyways, is like a self-avoidance, if you will. And that's like the last cognitive distortion they might have, where they might just be like, oh, I need to think about it, right? So the I need to think about it one, I think is really funny, because I literally steal it straight from Alex Ramosi.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I do is I'm like, okay, so just to be clear, usually when somebody says they need to think about, what that means is like what they're hoping will happen is they go home and like they sit back in a chair and they like puff on a cigar in front of the fireplace and they're like, do I want to train with that little punk kid from the gym? Right? And I'm like, of course you're not going to do that. Okay. You're going to go home. The kids are going to be going crazy. You're going to be super busy and you're going to make dinner. Like, you're not going to be able to think about it. Right? And when we say we want to think about it, what we really mean is we need more information. So I'm your source of information. So any questions you have right now, I'd love to answer them, but let's go ahead and like move through those thoughts together while I can answer questions that might come up.
Yep. I love using that last piece for sure. And again, with this whole process, we've peeled the onion back as far as limitation. So limitation based on external circumstances, limitation around, other people being the limiting factor. And now we've really gotten to like the nitty gritty, like where if they go home and think about it, they're thinking about it through the lens and through the frame of their own personal limitations, and the same limitations that have gotten them to the point where, they're out of shape, right? They desperately need our help. If they didn't need our help, we wouldn't have made this recommendation. We wouldn't have gotten to this point. So we need to make sure that we dive through those together and in person, as opposed to just letting that person go home and go through the same frame that they've.
I never even thought about that. Like, why would I trust, like, this sounds bad, but like, why would we trust somebody that's completely out of shape, overweight, doesn't go to the gym, to go home and make a decision on whether or not they should start going to the gym and start eating healthy and start doing the right things? Clearly they're not, I don't mean this in a mean way, but clearly they're not good at making that decision, or they would have already made it. Yeah. They need your help to make the decision.
We can trust them to make a bad decision.
Yeah,
and that's bad, right? It's not that we like wish ill on that individual, but I'm going to trust their future decisions to fall in line with their past frame of reference. Yeah. Yes. So if we don't help them change that frame of reference, if we don't empower them past these cognitive distortions, then that person's doomed. Like,
yeah, doomed. And it's the same thing where, like, even if they say yes, but they haven't moved through those things, right? Then the moment they go home, they go back to operating the same way that they were, and they don't actually follow suit with any sort of the program. Means you're not going to get any sort of renewal, because at the end of the day, they didn't make any progress. And then you also kind of look like a bad trainer if all the people you're training never make any progress.
Yeah, you don't want a surface level yes. We're like, oh, I'm just going to like buy 12 sessions so that I can throw it on my list of stuff I've tried to have.
That doesn't work. Yes.
Right? And people will do that all the time. And those are the easy yeses that you don't want. Right? Those
will kill your business rather than grow it. And you always are like, oh, I want the price tag now. But at the end of the day, like, if you have constantly like clients churning that are taking up time slots in your schedule, or you have clients that aren't making any progress at all, so like they're a really bad billboard for you, that's something that's not going to help your business. It's actually going to hurt your business. It's not a yes that you want. You'd rather them not say yes. Truthfully.
Right. Not that you'd rather them say no, but you want to use the opportunity that you have with them to dial up the yes.
Yes, of course.
It's the degree of commitment that you're getting.
And it's honestly, I think it's almost easier in the sign-up process.
100%.
Sometimes. Like, it's easier in a sign-up process to get someone to move through these distortions. Once somebody's your client, like already your client, it's a little harder, and it takes more steps to move through all of these other problems that they're having.
Yeah, because you've now set the pace where those kind of conversations are fine to just kick down the road.
Yeah,
exactly. And then you never have them, and then they're done, and then they're they're in an even worse position because now they think that you're not a solution for them.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the same reason that like as price point goes up as a trainer, like as you become more expensive, your clients make more results. And it's because they literally just commit that much harder.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's the exact same thing. Your business just grows tenfold as your price point goes with it. So you just got to build more conviction.
100%. So I hope today was helpful. I know, again, it's not like surface level objection handling. It's going to be more that skill set that gets the conversion rate up from like that 50% range up to 70, 80% range. But it's definitely a skill worth mastering and a process really from a conviction standpoint that's worth diving into. Because we know, I mean, from a base level conversion percentage, the person that is the most convicted and the most certain is going to be the one that influences the other person. So diving into the psychology, behavior sciences for a trainer is crucial because it helps deliver that skill set that really gets results and changes lives, not just...
Yeah. And I mean, worst case scenario, this video is just extra tools into your tool belt. Okay. If you don't follow this exact framework, you now at least know how to overcome a few specific objections that you can just pull from when you're in your appointments and you're in your assessments.
For sure. All right, guys. Thanks for the time.